There is a plant growing in the cracks of your sidewalk that, by several nutrient measures, outperforms foods we treat as nutritional gold standards. 1 cup of its cooked leaves can contain roughly 464 milligrams of calcium, compared with about 30 milligrams in a cup of spinach. The same cup can deliver about 66 milligrams of vitamin C, and measured ounce for ounce, the plant can offer more protein than beef. Those are startling numbers. The plant is lamb's quarters, a wild green that once fed entire cultures for millennia. How did something so nutritious become invisible to most of us? If you want more discoveries like this, subscribe. But first, hear the whole story, because the numbers are only half the point. The other half is the history. Archaeologists have found the bones of a different food system buried under our assumptions. They dug seeds out of storage pits in Kentucky and the Ozarks, seeds that show the telltale signs of intentional selection. These were not a casual snack. People were saving, storing, and cultivating this plant long before maize became dominant in eastern North America. In those excavations, seeds turn up with thinner seed coats than their wild relatives. In simple terms, that means humans bred them to germinate faster and more reliably, a classic domestication signal. Alongside carbon-dated layers and the remains of storage pits, those thin coats tell a clear story. For thousands of years, the plant was managed, cultivated, and kept on par with other staples. It was part of what archaeologists call the Eastern Agricultural Complex, a suite of plants that people tended and stored, season after season. Far from being a marginal fallback, lamb's quarters was a purposeful choice. The archaeological trail doesn't stop in North America. Similar seeds and remnants appear in old European and Viking contexts. Danish peat bog finds and medieval middens suggest people across continents used and stored related species of wild greens. In Asia and Latin America, varieties of wild and semi-domesticated greens play continuing roles in markets and home kitchens. In Indian vegetable stalls, Chinese village plots, and Mexican quilites markets. That continuity matters. It shows that the American cultural amnesia about this plant is not universal. Other cultures kept it alive, and immigrant grandmothers carried recipes and seed-saving know-how with them when they crossed oceans. So if lamb's quarters was once a staple, how did it vanish from mainstream diets? The answer is not a single villain, but a cascade of choices and systems that redefined what counted as food. As maize intensified and colonial agriculture reshaped landscapes and markets, certain crops gained economic and political support, while others were pushed to the margins. Industrial agriculture favored standardized, uniform crops that fit mechanized harvesters and long supply chains. At the same time, an ideological shift made tidy lawns and controlled gardens a cultural ideal. Anything that grew wild in a yard was framed as disorderly or undesirable. That cultural work was amplified by the rise of chemical weed control. As herbicide manufacturers grew, their products were marketed not only to farmers, but to homeowners eager for a manicured lawn. The availability of herbicides like 2,4-D and related products made it easier and cheaper to eradicate the diverse plants that once grew alongside human habitations. What had been part of human-managed ecosystems became a target for elimination. The economic stakes are large. Billions of dollars flow through industries that favor monocultures and engineered supply chains over resilient, low-input systems. When you add in the consolidation of leafy green production, large-scale fields, central packing facilities, refrigerated shipping, the result is a system that optimizes a small set of crops while marginalizing everything else. This is not just nostalgia. There are ecological and practical consequences. Lamb's quarters is a remarkably resilient plant. It tolerates compacted and degraded soils, sprouts in places with no irrigation, and reproduces in abundance. Its seeds are tiny but numerous. Human selection for thinner seed coats makes them quicker to sprout, and traditional seed saving kept local varieties adapted to particular climates and soils. Because it thrives where other crops struggle, lamb's quarters represents a low-input, high-resilience option, especially valuable when water is scarce or supply chains are strained. But resilience must be translated into usable knowledge. Nutrition, archaeology, and ecology all matter only if people know how to recognize, harvest, and prepare the plant safely. Identification is straightforward once you know what to look for. Leaves often have a diamond or goosefoot shape. Younger leaves are tender and mild. Older ones can be more substantial. Many plants show a mealy, powdery coating on new growth, or the undersides of leaves that looks like flower dust. Flower clusters are inconspicuous, and the tiny seeds darken as they mature, forming dense clusters where seeds can be gathered. When foraging, a few safety rules are critical. Never harvest from sites that might be contaminated. Roadsides, industrial lots, or areas recently sprayed with chemicals can concentrate toxins. Always be confident in your identification before eating any wild plant. Consult local experts, field guides, or community knowledge keepers. If you're pregnant, nursing, or have health conditions, check with a healthcare professional before making wild plants a regular part of your diet. And respect local laws and private property. Access and conservation matter. Cooking does more than make lamb's quarters taste good. It addresses important nutritional trade-offs. Like many leafy greens, lamb's quarters contains oxalic acid, the same compound that gives spinach its sharp edge. Cooking, especially blanching and discarding the cooking water or sautéing leaves thoroughly, reduces oxalate content and helps mineral bioavailability. Treat it like spinach or chard. Young leaves are excellent raw in small amounts, but cooking is a practical way to reduce oxalates and make the plant gentler on digestion. In many traditions, it's simply prepared with garlic and oil, folded into stews, or mixed with grains, humble techniques that unlock its nutrition. Let's return for a moment to those nutritional numbers, because they explain why cooks and foragers have cherished this plant across cultures. A cooked cup with roughly 464 milligrams of calcium is a substantial contribution to daily needs. Compare that to about 30 milligrams in a cup of spinach. Vitamin C at about 66 milligrams per cup means it can be an important source of this antioxidant and immune-supporting nutrient in a green leaf. And measured by weight, it provides levels of protein that, ounce for ounce, compare favorably to beef. Those are the metrics that make the title claim that this plant is better than beef, spinach, and milk combined. A provocative but ultimately nuanced one. It's accurate to say lamb's quarters outperform some familiar staples on specific nutritional metrics when measured in given units. But better is not absolute. It depends entirely on which nutrient you prioritize and how you measure a serving. For example, comparisons with milk require careful unit-by-unit verification. Lamb's quarters can rival or exceed some nutrients found in milk on a per-cup or per-calorie basis, but exact equivalence should be checked against specific milk data before making a blanket statement. That nuance matters because it reveals the deeper point. Nutrient density is not the whole story of food systems. Availability, cultural acceptance, processing, and economics all shape diets. We've engineered agricultural and market systems that privilege certain foods while obscuring others. The result is not merely the loss of a green in a field, but the loss of recipes, harvest practices, and seed lines that once made it a dependable source of nutrition. There is a human side to recovery, however. Cultural continuity persists in marketplaces and kitchens where lamb's quarters and related wild greens have remained culinary mainstays. In parts of Mexico, quelites, a category that includes lamb's quarters, show up in markets and family meals. In India and China, small-scale farmers and home gardeners have long cultivated and sold similar greens. Among indigenous communities and immigrant families in North America, knowledge survived through recipes, seed saving, and oral teaching. These cultural keepers are the reason we can still taste and learn from these plants today. If you want to try lamb's quarters yourself, here are practical conservative steps that keep safety and respect in focus. First, get familiar with identification in your area. Compare leaves, stems, and the mealy bloom with multiple reliable sources. Join a local foraging walk or community gardening group. Never harvest from contaminated or sprayed sites. When harvesting, take the tender top growth for the best texture and flavor. Older leaves can be cooked longer or chopped fine. To reduce oxalates, blanch the leaves briefly in boiling water, drain, and then use them sautéed or stewed. Small amounts of raw leaves in a salad are common in some traditions, but cooking is the safer way to make it a regular food. Saving seeds is part of regenerating food knowledge. Allow seeds to ripen and darken on the plant, then shake them into a container, or beat seed clusters gently so ripe seeds separate. Dry the seeds thoroughly in a ventilated, shaded place, then store cool and dry in airtight containers. Because many domesticated lines have thinner seed coats, their germination can be rapid, and saved local seeds will adapt over seasons to your particular yard or garden. Seed exchanges and community seed banks are powerful ways to keep varieties circulating rather than locked inside industrial supply chains. Thinking about lamb's quarters in the broader picture returns us to the systems question. The plant's marginalization was not inevitable. It was shaped by choices. Which crops received public research dollars, which were promoted in market channels, and which plants were framed as weeds. Those choices align with larger economic incentives, mechanization, consolidation, and scale. Re-legitimizing plants like lamb's quarters does not require throwing out progress. It asks for a different balance, for more support for diverse crops, more space for small-scale markets, and more respect for traditional ecological knowledge. There are tangible steps that move us from story to practice. Support local markets and farmers who grow diverse greens. Learn from and credit the people who have kept these foods alive. Indigenous communities, immigrant families, and small-scale growers. Lobby for public research dollars to include underutilized crops. And in your own yard or community garden, make room for diversity. A patch of lamb's quarters among herbs and vegetables can be both a living seed bank and a nutritional resource. We are living with a food system that often prizes uniformity over resilience. Lamb's quarters is a reminder that resilience exists in plain sight, in a plant that tolerates marginal soils, produces abundant seed, and offers concentrated nutrients. Rediscovery starts with recognition. The next time you see a plant with diamond-shaped leaves and a faint mealy bloom in an abandoned lot or garden edge, pause. Learn its name. Taste it cooked. Ask who has been eating and saving that seed for generations. The practical next step is small but generative. Try it on your plate. Cook a handful of tender leaves like you would spinach. Sauté with garlic and a squeeze of lemon, or fold into soups and grains. If you like what you taste, learn to save a few seeds at the end of the season. Share the recipe and the seed with a neighbor. Those modest acts are how wild knowledge survives. Before we close, a brief caution about the title's larger claim. Headlines often compress nuance into a single phrase. When a plant is said to be better than familiar foods, what that typically means is that, by certain nutrient measures and given specific portions or units, it outperforms them. Those comparisons are powerful and meaningful. They change how we think about overlooked foods, but they need to be read with units and context in mind. Exact equivalences, especially with dairy like milk, require careful side-by-side numbers. The takeaway is not that lamb's quarters will replace every food on your plate, but that it is a forgotten reservoir of nutrition and resilience worth reclaiming. This matters for more than dinner. In a world of increasingly strained water, centralized supply chains, and a narrowing of agricultural diversity, reintegrating resilient, nutrient-dense plants into our diets and gardens strengthens food sovereignty. It shifts power from a handful of monoculture choices back toward communities and ecosystems that can sustain themselves. If this story resonated, if you feel a mix of wonder and a little righteous indignation, and if you want practical guidance on how to make space for resilient foods where you live, share this video with someone who cares about food, history, or community resilience. Preserve the knowledge they tried to erase. Learn, grow, and pass the seed on. Subscribe to follow along as we dig into more of these overlooked foods and the histories that shaped what we think of as a meal today.